session 5 of When Times Get Tough. And for today's message, I'm going to look at Psalm 23. If anyone was having a tough time, it was King David. His own son had rebelled against him, gathered an army, was out to kill him. David was forced to flee, he was forced to hide in caves, he was relying on men who were loyal to him to bring him food and water and so on. Yet in this dire situation, he was able to write, "I have a God as my shepherd, that's all I could ever want." He knew that the shepherd was always there to look out for the best interest of the sheep. So if God is his shepherd, he could trust completely. And the power of the statement comes home when we think about the king of the country being driven out from his palace, having to live out in the wild. It was wrong. But to have his own son as the one who rebelled against him, that would have hurt so much. It was a real betrayal. And David had every reason to turn bitter and angry with God, and he had every reason to be angry with his son. But David loved God and loved his son. This is seen when the son Absalom was killed. He was killed in battle, but with a freak accident as his horse went under a tree. He was caught hanging in the tree. David's reaction was not, "Oh, thank goodness," but a reaction of grief. His response is there in 2 Samuel 18, verse 33. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." But while he was still in hiding, he wrote, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." Indeed he was. The threat of death was real. Yet he felt that God was like the shepherd there with his staff. And the staff was used to guide the sheep and to ward off any wild animals. It was a great comfort to him to know that God was there with him. He was his guide, his protector. And this enabled him to have no fear. To be able to trust like this, we need to have the knowledge of God as a God who is good. His desire for each of us is nothing but the best. Now, we can't explain why tough times happen, but if we know that God is good, then we can trust him. Firstly, that he's going to be right there with us, that he will be our guide and our comfort. He will be our greatest strength and support. But also, we will know that whatever we're going through, good will come out of it. And we may not see the good at the time. Sometimes we don't even get to see it in our lifetime. But the truth is, God uses it for good. And when we see that, we see in his kingdom, maybe, we'll understand what it was all about. The question is, are we able to trust in the goodness of God? We look at disaster, but God can turn disaster into victory. And the cross has to be the greatest example of that. The disciples were shattered. They saw Jesus put to death, and it was like everything we've put our lives into for the last 3 years has come to nothing. Or have we been just so badly mistaken that Jesus wasn't who he said he was? And then there's the grief. They'd lost someone they really loved, and probably angry at the people who'd put him to death. But in hindsight, we know that the cross was essential. In fact, it was the victory over the forces of evil, and it could happen in no other way. His resurrection was the vindication of all of this. Trust in God. He does know what he's doing.